In today's video I'll be looking at this Bontempi chord organ. It was made in the 1970s and was given to me by a friend who found it in a second-hand shop. This isn't an electronic organ, it's actually a reed instrument, and the only powered component is this fan mounted on the bottom, which provides the air pressure. It's essentially a plastic toy harmonium with an electric motor instead of a foot pump. This design of organ with a fairly short keyboard for the right hand and chord buttons for the left hand was quite popular in the 70s. The chords are arranged in the order of the circle of fifths, so that the chords you're likely to be using together are placed close to each other. The green buttons play the root notes. And the white buttons play the third and fifth of the major chord. Pressing both buttons together plays the full major triad. An electronic chord organ would have extra buttons for minor and seventh chords, but this one just has the majors. You might have noticed that some of these chords sound a bit out of tune, and in fact the whole instrument has a rather avant-garde approach to intonation. The C button, for example, is supposed to play in unison with the lowest note on the keyboard, but it's actually about 65 cents sharper. You can get an interesting effect by holding down a chord and turning off the power. Each note of the chord decays at a slightly different rate, depending on the amount of air pressure needed to vibrate its reed. The organ also has this volume control, which works by simply opening and closing a hole in the top of the wind chest. Unfortunately, it's not very useful, as although opening the hole does lower the volume of the notes, it also increases the amount of audible fan noise and makes the organ go even more out of tune than it was at full volume. As the organ is a good 50 years old, the key mechanism isn't working as well as it probably would have done when it was new. Some of the keys stick a bit, and some of them are much more sensitive than others, and some of the notes take a while to get going once the key has been pressed. This makes it almost impossible to play anything with accurate timing, as you'll see shortly. I disassembled the organ to give the mechanism a good clean in the hope of making it easier to play. It didn't really help, but it was still interesting to see inside and how it works. This photo shows the base of the organ with the keys completely removed. The air comes out through this strip of yellow sponge and the reeds sit on top of it. You can also see the mechanism for the volume control here. This is the underside of the key mechanism showing the reeds. The main keyboard uses conventional metal reeds, although the bass and chord section has plastic ones. Here I've reinstalled the key mechanism. The keys are simply pivoted to lift up over the reeds when they're pressed down, and the metal bar across the middle has springs underneath to hold them in the closed position when they're not being pressed. The 50-year-old plastic is very brittle and easy to damage, and unfortunately I managed to accidentally break off a section of this corner. Worse still, the bottom half of the case forms the wind chest and has to be reasonably airtight for the organ to work. I was hoping to be able to disassemble it fully to access the inside of the broken section and do a nice repair with some epoxy, but the top board of the wind chest is glued in place and can't be removed, so I've had to make do with some gaffer tape on the outside. It's not the neatest repair ever, but it works. So now let's hear some music on this instrument. As always, I'm going to play a folk song, and as I want to demonstrate the use of the chord buttons, I've had to pick something with only major chords. I've gone for my arrangement of Ye Banks and Braes by Robert Burns. Although as the E above middle C doesn't work well on this organ, I've transposed it from G major to F major to avoid using that note. Burns wrote the lyrics in 1791 and set them to an already existing tune called The Caledonian Hunt's Delight. The same melody is also used in East Anglia for a version of the widespread English song Foggy Dew. I'll start by playing a verse of the song on the organ without any editing or additional production, so you can see just how challenging this instrument is to work with. Afterwards I'll see if I can come up with something a bit more musical. second version of this song, I've recorded all the notes separately, and then I've pitch corrected them and edited them together into the tune. This also gets rid of most of the mechanical noise of the keyboard, and means that I can adjust the level of the bass and the chords so that they're not as overpowering as in the first version. I've also used some compression and EQ and added some additional instruments in the second verse. I hope you'll agree that this version was a lot more musical than the first one, and I hope that you've enjoyed looking at this organ as much as I did. Thanks for watching.